I should just explain who I am. My name's Carolyn Reynolds. I'm exec producer. I founded Line Pictures independent production company, so that's where I come from. The session today as well, remember when you put your hands up to allow time for people to get a microphone to you so we can make sure everybody hears the question that you want to put. Sound is one of those things that we all take for granted, of course, on the screen until something goes horribly wrong, and then we all go, what's happened to sound? Because it's impossible to live life without it. So we have two sound supremos with us today, and they're absolutely at the top of their field, and they're going to try and give you a wonderful insight into their field. Mike Felton, who is next to me, who's everything from BBC in the past in sound, but now very much concentrating on the music side, especially things like Glastonbury. And then we have Chris Ashworth, who is also here to talk about what it's like to do all the sound on shows like Downton Abbey and all those fantastic big dramas and location sound recording. I'm going to turn to you, Mike, first, because I'm going to pose a question to both of you, which is a real tricky one, which is sort of, if you can, in a succinct way, say what it's like to be a sound recordist now.
It's rewarding if you can get it right. I'm very personally, I'm fortunate in the material I get to work on, but from the point of view of, as you mentioned earlier, sound is, I think we need to turn me down a bit. Sound is something that is you only notice when it goes wrong, as you said. So you don't go into sound to be, with any ego, because it's basically a masochist job, because you only get shouted at if it goes wrong. So you do it for your own satisfaction, basically.
Yeah.
But, so then you've got to, I think, want to appreciate the whole communication thing of conveying good material
and a perfection,
to an audience.
I suppose,
Yes.
isn't it? Perfection of a particular art, because it's a very specialist field now, isn't it? It's people are moving schedules around to accommodate people like you onto a shoot now. It's a real specialist field, isn't it?
Yes, in particular niche areas, yes, yeah. Yes.
Chris, would you echo that? Would you say the same?
Yeah, I think perfection is a very difficult thing to ever aim to. I think most sound practitioners I know are passionate about what they do because they have to be. Without their own individual drive, you'd never stay in the job.
Can I just turn to the audience? How many of you are interested in particularly in the field of sound? Okay, not too many. How many of you are interested in being directors? Okay, well, you can't do what you do without these guys. So, and they can make your life hell. So it's in all our interests, I think, too.
The reverse is true as well, of course.
Indeed, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, let's see what it's all about. Shall we see our first clip, which is from Glastonbury?
I've been alone with you inside my mind, and in my dreams I've kissed your lips 1,000 times. I sometimes see you pass outside my door. Come on, help me now. Hello. everybody song. Everybody. All night long. All night long. It's your turn to sing. Can you get louder? Yeah. Once you get started, you can't deny. Yeah. Come join the fun. It's a merry-go-round. Yeah. People are dancing their way. Yeah. Come join our party. See how well. Everybody clap your hands right now. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Say, Carmelita, Sentimo, your turn. Say, wait to party, oh, we go, your turn. Say, Carmelita, Sentimo, yeah. Yeah, jump, jump. Whoa. Can you believe that? All night long. All night long. Your turn to sing. Can you get louder? Yeah.
One of the most incredible things about that clip is, can you imagine just watching that without sound? It kind of just says it. What was that like? I mean, how on earth can you cover the sound on a project of that size, Mike?
Well, it's only a band and a few audience mics. Those aren't really the problems. The problems with doing that sort of work is the fact that you're covering maybe 9 bands in quick succession throughout, with only maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes turnaround between each one. And so everything has to be planned as much as you can ahead of time. You get the channel lists of what each band consists of.
But you don't get, do you get rehearsals?
No. If you're lucky in the sort of turnaround time, somebody will go around and scratch all the mics and maybe hit a few drums to make sure you've got the right thing connected and it's not buzzing or whatever. So, faults might have to be sorted out. So it's a very pressured time. So, and you're working on unknown material because you haven't had any rehearsal. So it's seat of the pants and you just launch into it. And it can be quite a big sort of pressure, especially on the pyramid stage where you get the big name artists, and that was the usual Heritage Sunday afternoon slot, which gets usually, well, it certainly did in this case, the largest turnout. The crowd stretches back into infinity. So it's quite a sort of responsibility of launching into that, and it's going out live, of course, as well.
Do you get much of a brief from say the BBC saying, we want you to cover the audience, we need you to cover this, that? No, they leave it to you.
Yeah, because it's a sort of an ongoing thing that is maintained from year on year. So it's established.
An expectation that you will know what.
I mean, on something like that, what you have to be watching out for is the possibility of audience reaction, which on there was fantastic. It took Lionel Richie by surprise, I think. He was genuinely shocked by the response. We wouldn't really expect an audience of that sort of age group to be all that, but they were familiar with the classic sort of material.
Do you have a large team? Who does, what's the sort of hierarchy and who does what on that team?
Well, that whole festival thing is an enormous operation in total. I mean, because that's only one of 6 stages for a start that are covered by the BBC. Yeah. So it's a huge organisation of logistically. In terms of the sound coverage, there's only maybe 2 guys on stage from the Beeb, liaising with the on-stage provision, which is a separate company, who are very clued up, very switched on. And there's a sort of an A-B operation of setup. So while one band is on, behind, there's more space behind the backdrop than there is in front of it. So the succeeding band is being set up, and it just rolls around during the... So, and usually there's two of us mixing as well. We flip-flop, so you're not doing necessarily successive bands. You do one, and your colleague does the next band normally. I mean, not necessarily like that, but I tend to do the stuff the TV's more interested in, and my colleague from Radio 1 does the stuff that radio would be more interested in.
And are you linking in with sort of the transmission element, as in because
no, not
it's
at
live?
all. No, because as I said, there are separate trucks doing the presentation.
So they'll handle all of that separately?
Yes, all you're doing is producing the music mix.
Right.
Can I ask you, as a technician, I'd want my mic lines to be checked through, my mics to be on the stage. You don't get that opportunity at Glastonbury, presumably you split feeds, do you, with the live
Yes,
guys?
it's just, as you say, you're sharing the PA, whatever is mics. There's only one set of mics which are split, as you say, to the monitors, and, well, three ways: to the front of house, which is out in the field, mixing for the audience, monitoring, which is on stage, and broadcast, which is us.
Of course, that sort of brings on, because you actually started in radio, didn't you?
Only briefly.
Right. But
yes.
you saw an opportunity in television and thought you preferred that?
Yes, well, it was way back in the dark ages when there was only one BBC channel and one ITV channel. Mm-hmm. And at the time, TV was a more exciting frontier than radio, so I sort of arranged a transfer. And that was in the days when it was still black and white and 405 lines. And
what were you doing in those early days then? Were you sort of...
Well, in the first couple of years of radio, I got quite proficient at quarter-inch editing, actually, mostly in foreign languages, bizarrely, because it was the external services. But also, which shows the sort of change of technology from then to now, I also recorded direct discs, 78 RPM acetate discs, which only last 3 minutes, for sort of recording incoming reports from abroad or whatever. Mm-hmm. So if you think going from recording discs up to the current digital technology, it's quite a huge... and of course the rate of change tends to be increasing even.
So adaptability is one of the key
Yes, well,
strengths.
that's another fascinating aspect of the job is...
keeping up with.
Well, not necessarily keeping up with, but seeing possibilities,
leading,
exploring, and being seeing the exciting new. You can do things that would be science fiction back in 30 years ago. Yeah. Wow!
But I presume you're constantly, both of you, saying, "Actually, I can do this a different way." Do you get these opportunities?
It is very much using the technology to improve your performance rather than being driven by the technology. Yeah. So rather than trying to fit into it, you make it work for you, and that's all.
So you exploit it for flexibility or efficiency reasons.
Yeah. Chris, how did you start in there? What made you go down this world?
Discos long years ago. I'm lucky enough to have a friend who was a sound supervisor at BBC who ran mobile discos when I was 14. Tried a bit of bank work and thought it was horrible. So stuck with it, applied to the Beeb, and didn't get offered a job at the film department, but was told that I was close enough to worth continuing. So I went into the West End in post-production and then moved to Thames Television, and then from post into location sound, and have been travelling the world ever since.
I'd like to show a clip of one of the productions you've done recently, which is the Day We Sang with Victoria Wood. Do you want to tell us a bit about, the clip we...
a production company I did quite a lot of work for asked me to get involved with this project with Victoria Wood. She, unusually as a director, wanted me to do as much live singing as possible, with all the difficulties of providing music in Manchester in the middle of winter. So this particular clip we had the Halley Orchestra for a morning to record all the necessary music links we needed through the whole piece, and also to turn around a finale for playback for the afternoon. So the film crew were all staying around not being able to do anything unusually while I had the morning to do the orchestra, and then turn around for playback, so they sing, so they join in. There's also a big choir behind it who weren't available for another 2 weeks, so we did the music first and then the choir after, and all those elements of juggling location sound then come into their own.
It's funny when you were saying that you'd have a crew sitting around waiting whilst you were doing your bit, that as an exec producer, of course, I'd be getting a twitch in my left eye at that thought because of the costs involved. So,
well, at the planning meeting it was,
productions.
but because we only had the Halley for the day,
Yeah.
And it was only half of them, 44 of them, and the music director wanted all this music to be available for the whole production, that we had these 12 pieces of music we had to record, a finite time to do it. And so at the production meeting I said, well, if we do it, because there's an addition of electronic instruments into there for the score, we couldn't do it as live, so you couldn't do it simply with a pair of mics over the top of the orchestra. You had to do the whole thing with multiple mic setups and monitors for conductors. And so there was a forest of microphones over these orchestras, so nothing could be done, even though they were put in costume beforehand. They played for me, and then we filmed for the afternoon.
Let's have a look at the clip.
All the shame, all the blame, all the stuff we are dragging behind us. We should turn, we should look, we should give it a shove. We ditch the chains, there's nothing to bind us, and what remains is love. All those years at the back of the queue don't seem real. All those dreams that were never on view will reveal all we felt that we didn't deserve. Hand in hand we can summon that love to feel love and give love.
How did you get to work on that project? Do you have to sort of pitch to producers to do certain projects? Do you get asked to do them? How does it work?
It's the job is really more about, once you're proficient in your job, it's more about who you know, how your reputation is maintained. The particular producer and executive producer on that I did a job with earlier in the year. I have a reputation for being able to sort out fairly difficult music playback stuff. They knew this was going to be tricky. The cameraman was someone I'd worked with for 20 years. The job fell into my lap when the local guy that was going to do it wasn't available. So they then had the additional cost of accommodating me in Manchester, taking me up, and all those things which are so tight in any budget need to be taken into account. So I was then given this wonderful opportunity to do a mad 24 days shooting in 4 weeks.
And would you say that was one of the hardest ones you've worked on, or just because of the complexity of the thing?
No, I think it was quite complex, but they're all hard. And what the difficulty of jobs is not necessarily the complexity of the job you're given; it's the time you're given to sort out the complexity. And I think the idea of professional is someone that can turn in a high job, a high standard of work in the time allowed. And for professionals, I think that's really what it comes down to. And you can create problems, and in your planning you can elbow in a bit of time because you can see these problems coming. But on the day, things take precedence. If the bus won't start, you can't use the bus. What do you do about doing the singing on a bus? How do you get around it? So all those things, all the time that I would like, are taken up with the cameraman needing more and more cutaways, needing more and more shots, director feeling they've not got it. So my time always gets squashed down. So this was unusual for me that I had a whole morning, but I still had the first assistant saying to me, "Are you ready to go yet? Have you turned it around for playback? We want to go on." So you still, that pressure's there all day. That particular day I had 7 guys in. I had a guy who came in and set up the larger mixing desk so that we were ready to go, so that was all done before we got in. We still had to run 44 mic lines in and clear them off the stage. We still had to balance the orchestra and go through all the elements of balancing that. And then we had to turn it around for playback, and then we had to pre-record the vocal, and then we had to try and record it live, and then we had to give the kids a bit of space. You know, it was a long day, interesting day with its problems, and we achieved. And at the end of the day, if I come out achieving and everyone's happy, no one notices, no bad complaints from the press when it went out. That's a good job. That's a good job.
Would anyone like to ask Chris and Mike any questions so far? We have more to see, but anybody got anything so far? Okay, we've got a gentleman here at the front. If we can just get the microphone to you.
So far you describe a life that's full of work and long hours. How do you get to combine personal life and work in a satisfactory manner?
Chris.
In my situation, this year, my life was taken up with War and Peace. I went out to Russia beginning of January, came back, and I'm now on a job for Netflix. When I get to the end of this, if I do a good job with the Netflix job and I get offered the second series, I can take 5 months off work. So I then get a bit of life. My family life is important to me. The time between jobs is very precious, and you want to be in a situation where you are using the money you're earning to support the time you're not. So if you're anyone starting out in this business, don't think the money you're getting for your day is your money for that day. It's your money for 2 days or 3 days, and you try and think of it that you're going to earn enough in a year. You may do 30 weeks, 40 weeks. When I first went freelance, I was aiming to do 42 weeks a year. And that's sort of where I settled. I've had a couple of years where work dropped off completely and I did 5 months work. And then it gets tough to do that. So your life then becomes a constant chase for work rather than enjoying the time you have off.
Let's just go, there was another arm that was waving at that's it, just over there, which... Is this for Mike or for Chris? Anyone in particular?
For Mike.
Mike.
On that production we just saw, how did you manage to record the sound and then manage to get all the mics off? Did you do it in 2 takes, so you recorded it separately?
No, we did the morning
Chris.
with the Forrester mics over the orchestra. So we got, because of the electronic element, we had to multi-track everything. In a film world, you wouldn't normally do that. You'd put a mic over the top of the orchestra. Think of Radio 3's wonderful classic recordings, quite simply done. You then had to clear everything off, so it was literally thrown off in a little room around the back where a couple of technicians put it back in boxes to get ready to ship off. I then had groups that I'd submixed, which I used for the playback of music, so we could give silent playback to the main actors, supported with a speaker when the choir came in, to enable me to have all the elements to give to an edit.
Okay, let me just turn to you, Mike, because we're going to see a little clip from Later with Jules, which is another music piece, which is quite a complex production, isn't it? Could you just give me a bit of sort of description of how a show like Later with Jules would work, as in how many in the team was working with you and what the sort of challenges were?
Well, the challenges are in this particular show of covering maybe 6 musical acts in real time in 1 hour in the same room. As in contrast to Glastonbury, where there is zero rehearsal and it's seat of the pants. This later with Jules is more considered. You have more lot of preparation time. It's basically a 2-day program. The first day, no vision involved. It's just rigging, getting all the bands in, and lighting. Lighting guys are doing a bit tweaking. We're rigging all the bands, sound checking them one at a time. So we have 1 hour each for the 4 main bands. Hopefully by then you've got to a stage where you can immediately go into camera rehearsals on the following day. There's a crew of 3 guys on the floor, well, not all guys, we have some girls as well, on the floor. A 4th guy is my coordinator for the PA, because there is an audience involved in the 4 corners. So there's a PA setup which is zoned for the 4 corners, and that can be either derived direct off the bands or from my stems from my desk. So, but there's a lot of logistical planning involved from my point of view in order to meet the time pressure, because as you're saying, time is the issue always.
Yeah.
Because you could possibly have 180 circuits coming from the studio. So I have to pre-plan with sort of spreadsheets how we're getting those circuits into the studio and where I'm putting them on the desk. It's all going into one digital desk with 6 layers, virtual layers. So basically it's 1 band per layer. So then after the first day, when we've sound checked and we've got everything into the right ballpark sound-wise, on the second day, after lunch, we start camera rehearsing. We camera rehearse each band separately. And the director, Janet, does a lot of preparation work again. So she's got her sort of coverage already worked out. And
So she's gone through all of that coverage with you.
Yes.
She said,
Well,
this is what I'm going to be covering in this.
On the first day, during the sound checks, her assistants clock the proceedings to see if what the band is playing now is the same as what they're expecting, because from a timing point of view, and in order to make sure the structure is the same as what they're anticipating for this shot scripting, because most of it is scripted, so you're looking at the right thing at the right time.
Yeah. And everyone's following that same script, so everybody knows what's going to happen next. Is the plan.
Director, the cameras are.
Yeah.
But it's quite a neat system we've got now. We record the sound checks, and as soon as one song is finished, my assistant uploads it to a Dropbox, and the girls download it off Dropbox onto their phones. So within minutes of the song finishing, they can be listening to it again and checking the structure.
Yeah.
And then in the afternoon on the second day, camera rehearsals, as I say, 1 at a time. The only time it runs in sequence is for the recording and the live, because we record the hour version, which goes out on Friday first, starting about 8:30, and hopefully finishing about 9:45, leaving us about a quarter of an hour to turn round to do the on-air live version, which is like a cut-down version, potentially with different material as well, for the Tuesday version.
So it's another seat of your pants type of.
Yeah, but as I said before,
more
that's more controlled, because you've had quite a lot of rehearsal.
Yeah. Okay, let's have a look.
Hello, my name
not here to draw my gaunt spirit about beneath what I am allowed, beneath what I am allowed.
The city street is high, the heat is escalating. Every corner in the town, there's a paycheck waiting. Put a flower in your pocket. If you see them, boy, you drop it and you
When you're dealing with a huge range of different bands, they're obviously going to have very strong opinions, aren't they, on what their sound is like, what it should be like. Do you get problems with that or not?
No, most of the time I'm left to my own. Probably because they've got confidence by now anyway. We've been doing the show for 23 years.
It helps.
But yes, I mean, sometimes people come in for a listen and offer their... but as I said before, timing is a pressure anyway. There usually isn't time. You know, you're banging through the rehearsals in the afternoon.
And can you explain, do you work with the same teams a lot, or
Yes,
to get continuity of
we
who
have
you
a
talk
very
to?
we have a very consistent family of people that have worked on the show for a long time, which helps a lot. It's a very loyal sort of core team.
And what are their job roles? What are their...
What, you mean overall or just sound?
just looking at the sound team, who does what, really?
Well, I plan it all and mix it, obviously. I have an assistant with me in the room who sort of runs the infrastructure and makes sure that all, as I said, the recordings are done, uploading them to Dropbox, and making sure that I'm not routing things to the wrong things on multitrack and things like that, and offering a younger set of ears for the high-frequency problems that are probably beyond my range. And then I have, as I said before, 4 people on the crew, chap doing coordinating PA and 3 floor rigging people, basically, who and that can be quite tricky because some of the acts, the smaller ensembles, might happen in the centre of the room that have to be set in during the course of a previous number and then struck out again. So it all has to be logistically sort of planned. That's the director sorts that out in terms of order of which band you're covering when.
Yeah. Another field completely, which we need to move on to now, is drama, Chris. And we have some clips to show. That's obviously very different in terms of larger budgets, but you've got cast members as well as directors to have to deal with. Is it a completely different world, a sort of sound world for drama? Or
no, there's an approach on Downton Abbey has an approach that they insist that any speaking cast has a radio mic on, which is not something that I necessarily would adhere to because it makes a limited amount of location equipment very. It stretches your abilities to deal with everything there. So when you watch this clip, you just take an idea of how many speaking parts there are in each scene. you get an idea of what I'm talking about. And then when you look at shot sizes, whether you feel you need to have a radio mic on those people because of shot size and how it's cut, and then we can have a very interesting debate on who drives what I do on the floor. And the nice thing about period drama is you tend to be shooting in places that are old, so they don't have roads around them, so a lot of my everyday noise problems sort of evaporate. You still get a lot of issues to deal with on a daily basis, but the main issue is managing a large amount of radio mics with very limited equipment, again with a time pressure, because you've still got to shoot 4.5, 5 pages a day with all the relevant shots. So you're looking at 2 cameras shooting, you end up with about 45, 46 shots a day. 2 cameras shooting, it's quite a high turnaround of material. And
you'll be sent scripts in advance. What do you get in advance?
Again, I would plan all that. So I get a script, I work out, it's a very simple, go through, count up, add up, work out what you've got. The way drama's shot now, I try to insist that I have a good boom operator and a very good assistant on the floor, and then I pull a trainee in if I need extra people to do radio miking. So we need to get all the mics on beforehand under costumes. So there's a planning that goes on the night before about which girls are wearing what dress, what colour mic goes on, who puts it on, whether they come in with a Mike's dress. Maggie Smith always wears high necks. So you've got to have a costume assistant you can trust to put a mic in a good place. So there's a bit of training goes on there. Once the dresses are on, they're very hard to get to the mics. We put packs down the bottom of the legs so you can change batteries during the day. And you've got a high amount of costume changes and an enormous amount of equipment that gets thrown into a situation that doesn't necessarily need it, but it's a production requirement, so you do what you're told.
Let's have a look at a clip from Downton Abbey.
And this is for you. The usual cloth for a frock, I'm afraid. But I hope you like the other thing.
I'm sure I will, milady. Thank you.
We all prayed for him in church this morning.
Happy Christmas, Anna.
I can't wait for you to open this. Thank you, Your Ladyship.
Happy Christmas, Mrs.
What did her ladyship say?
Brian? She was just being kind.
Happy Christmas and
I wish I could tell you not to worry.
My husband's on trial for his life, Mrs. Hughes. Of course I worry.
Well, I'm old-fashioned enough to believe that they can't prove him guilty when he's not.
This is for you.
Thank you, milady.
The royal families of Europe. Oh, my. I shall find this very interesting, my lord. Good.
I don't want to spoil their fun, but I couldn't wear a paper hat. Not with poor Mr. Bates locked away.
His lordship said much the same.
Is Mr. Bates the one Lady Rosamond told me about? The murderer?
Mr. Bates has most unjustly been accused of murder. That is all.
All? I should think that's quite enough for most people.
Thank you. You like tea?
Why do we have to help ourselves at luncheon?
Yes.
It's a Downton tradition. They have their feast at lunchtime and we have ours in the evening.
But why can't they have their lunch early and then serve us, like they normally do?
Because it's Christmas Day.
It's not how we'll do it at Haxby.
Which I can easily believe. Oh, this is nice. What is it?
What does it look like?
Something for getting stones out of horses' hooves?
It's a nutcracker. We thought you'd like it.
Good.
To crack your nuts.
Who's coming on New Year's Day?
The usual guns, us three, and some locals. You'll know all of them.
Have you asked Anthony Strallen?
I tried. In fact, I gave him 3 days, but he said no to all of them. Perhaps he's given it up.
But he was so keen before the war.
Perhaps he's had enough banging for one life.
Oh, and Rosamond's forced me to invite Lord Hepworth.
Really?
Well, I told him I was coming down here, and he dropped hint after hint.
Perhaps he has nowhere to go. It can be a lonely time of year.
Jinx Hepworth lonely. I find that hard to believe. Hepworth men don't go in for loneliness much.
How do you know him?
I knew his father in the late 60s. Mais où sont les neiges d'antan?
It's quite good to play our next clip, if we can, quite quickly after that one, whilst it's fresh in everybody's mind, the difference sort of between the finished product and something that we're now going to see that is not finished. Do you want to talk a little bit about our War and Peace clip, which you very kindly...
Yes, I've chosen this clip because this again took a bit of planning, but this was filmed overnight in St. Petersburg with a very rushed location, in and out. It's a big dance sequence. When it was planned, the emphasis was on the dance sequence. You see what happens in the edit, and edit can change things enormously from what we've done. There's a time pressure to make your program fit within your hour, and what we set out to achieve, we achieved, but what was edited is not what we set out to achieve. It still works. It will work when it's been through a dub, but at the moment this is straight out of the Avid. This is what the editor's dealing with, the elements that I give them. For me, the clarity of the dialogue is important. The fact that there's some Foley there. There's a very interesting problem that comes out of this that I hope some of you will spot. We'll see what happens.
Let's play the clip.
Should you still be here? Why aren't you at your father's bedside?
Quite right. I know I should be there. Somehow I'm afraid to go. You know, I never really knew him, not properly.
Flo, you dance.
Oh, no, I'm too clumsy.
Come on, did you?
All right, what do I do?
Like this. I'm so glad you came. What is it?
My father is having a stroke.
We'll go together.
Quickly now, it's a matter of life or death.
Why that's really interesting to sort of, it's running the tune here, I think, hopefully highlights the difference between that sort of finished product and how you get to that finished product. So it's that time sort of after the shoot, but before transmission. This one's hot off the cutting room floor and doesn't go out till after Christmas. So we're lucky we've got this clip. But can you just explain a little more, Chris, about what those sort of, if you think about layers of sound and things that have changed at the end of the shoot, really?
Within the dance sequence, the first piece is an increasing tempo right the way through the music. And there's a Foley track that goes underneath it that I had about 3 minutes to get. And I tried to get the audience to increase the tempo. It was very difficult to achieve. We didn't achieve it, and the edit cut down that increasing tempo enormously, so the music doesn't actually cut. So it needs to be rescored. So you go from a situation where you've got a piece of music that's been agreed that has a finite length that you think you're working to, so you I applied, there's a loudspeaker in there to give everyone up, so there's a bit of coloration in there, which could potentially destroy anything you do with the dialogue, because if that bit of music, now it's not cutting, is under a bit of dialogue that you need to use, you can't use it, you've got to post-sync it. So although the dialogue at the moment is very quiet and whispered with that element of noise that's been put on by the editor, it will brighten up, it'll EQ, you'll be able to hear what Nikolai says when he wants to marry. So that whispered stuff will come out, and Pierre's voice will thin out as well, and that'll punch through that eventually. So the music element was important. It was difficult to get. We were in Russia with very limited equipment, and it's very hard to get hold of anything else that you need to use while you're in St. Petersburg, because anything you need is in Moscow. 7 hours travel away, and invariably has to come with a technician because none of us are capable of using it. So a difficult piece to achieve. When it's finished, I hope no one will notice the difference.
Would anybody like to ask Mike or Chris any questions? Yes, I've got, well, there's a gentleman here, sort of in the middle.
Thank you. I was just wondering, as directors, obviously, it's very easy to relate to the DOP and the script writer when you're doing your work, but I just wondered if you could talk about the relationship and how you can build a good relationship with a director or a sound designer, both on set and in post-production.
Can we start with Mike first, and then Chris, could you, if you need to add anything?
Well, I don't think in my particular position that applies really. It's just, apart from trust, having worked with people for years, you know, as Chris was saying, your reputation is mainly what makes you employable, which is people tend to work with people they feel safe, because it's a very vulnerable position for a director. You know, you've got your baby, and it could be trashed by somebody.
So for a sound recordist, it's gaining the reputation, but also obtaining good relationships with directors, and directors getting good relationships with certain recorders.
Yes, I mean, there's compromise is always required amongst all the different disciplines that come together to, because in order to make a film shoot or especially TV live, not everybody can achieve 100% in their own particular, so there's trade-offs need to be made between different lighting, cameras, sound, design. So there's a lot of flexibility required.
Adaptability, isn't it? Chris, would you?
And that collaboration, but in my world, it's different to Mike's. You get a director who's standing next to his cameraman, who are dependent on getting a certain number of shots to make their edit work. When the day starts drifting away, the one thing they don't want is me saying, I need to go again, there was a plane. How are you going to cut this? So I get, like Mike, I get left to my own devices. There are issues I need to raise if I need to go again for any particular reason. I'd raise it. If the director wants to choose not to do it, then it's a problem he has to deal with in post. We try not to make those problems too large, and we try not to make them, you get the sound you deserve, which is, can be a difficult thing. And you find, especially with new directors, when they start shooting and there's a budget and a time constraint, when their days start drifting away, they have to concentrate on the number of shots because they have to get something that cuts. So sound gets put secondarily. We can sort it out in post is a phrase that I hate hearing, because you can sort things out in post. They're never as good. You're there to capture a performance and to tell a story. As a director, you need to capture a performance, and the performance isn't the pictures of a performance, it's the whole thing.
You can sort of enhance in post-production, but you can't save in post-production, I think.
No, you destroy and replace, but you can't ever you can reproduce what's there, but you can't ever capture that performance again.
Any more questions? Gentleman at the front, if we can get a microphone down here. Keeping you fit.
I think it ties in what you were just saying there. When did you become confident enough? Because being on set's a high-pressured situation, so what advice would you give someone that was just moving into the industry now in terms of don't rush what you're trying to do, make it the best it can be, but at the same time deal with the director or deal with the budget and stuff like that?
Mike?
Do you mean don't take on jobs that you'd...
I think what I'm trying to... When you first started out, I imagine it was quite... There was a lot of anxiety there in terms of, I've got to get this right, because, you know...
I think it's
Well, I think it's an incremental process. You don't suddenly leap into high-pressure jobs. Hopefully, it's a staged, process of acquiring more and more experience as you go. It's probably more difficult now in the freelance world. I mean, in my day when I worked at the BBC, it was a huge department, and you had craft managers, and they managed your career, and maybe went to a director who was thinking of the next series of sitcoms or something, and was saying, rather than his favourite mixer, I think you ought to give Mike a go. I think he's an up-and-coming lad. Your career was managed to a certain extent, so that gets over that aspect of moving on to the more difficult stuff in stages.
But I guess you can learn. Am I right in saying you can learn from in early days from people that you're working with, as in you can see...
Yeah, you would start the job in not in the responsible role of the head of that department or the head of that show. You'd start on other jobs working under someone else's direction. So you work on what are perceived high-pressure jobs, and you learn that you're going to do your job regardless of the pressure around you, because nowadays that's part of my job is to manage the pressure that's coming from the top, to allow my team to get on and deal with the pressure on the floor and get me what I want. So I act as a buffer, and I will do all sorts of strange things to create a bit of time to get things fixed and right. There's no point in turning over if you're not ready. There's no point if you've got huge reflection problems in these big houses with mirrors. You've got to sort those problems. You can't just say, we'll just turn over anyway. So you get used to dealing with that. But it's not something that you're expected to deal with as a supervisor on a show like this without a lot of experience. So when you're starting out, you get the confidence to know, hopefully you've got the training to know what sound you want to achieve. You work with your cameraman, you work with your director, and you do everything you can to achieve that sound. You still have to do it within the time allowed. And that's the big pressure. And if you do it as an assistant or as a trainee, someone above you will be absorbing that pressure and hopefully not transferring that pressure to you, to enable you to do your job and learn how to do it. And the more confident you get, the quicker you do things, the more you understand your abilities and the dynamics of working with everyone else around you, because you've still got to get on with an operator. You've still got to be able to speak to the gaffer. You've still got to deal with costume. You may have to put mics in hair, so you've got to deal with makeup. You've got to do it to a stage where you're not putting anyone else under any pressure either. So you've got to think about what you're doing. So in a drama situation, for every member that's involved in shooting the scene, to see the block is very important, because you've got your problems before anyone starts to set and light a shot. So you know what you're dealing with. To get put in a situation where you don't have that time adds a whole heap of pressure to the whole department, because you're actually trying to make it work as live, not knowing what your cover is and what your problems are.
Let's look at one more clip. This is one of yours, Mike, which this was Wynton Marsalis in concert. This is a kind of big band sound, so it's a very different setup to a Glastonbury, isn't it? Can you say a bit about it?
Yes, it's it's similar in the sense that it's a performance by a band, but it's under more controlled circumstances in that it was a single concert. It's different in the sense that it's a one-shot setup on a location. It's more difficult in the sense that the truck you might be working in isn't really appropriate for mixing music in. It's just a normal OB scanner with a tiny desk in a sort of a phone booth-sized room. So at the time of shooting, you're hoping to produce a sufficiently good mix is transmittable, and obviously will be okay for the edit, but it's also multi-tracked individually, so for a remix afterwards. It's similar but different.
Okay, let's have a look.
Thank you very much. This next piece is composed by tenor saxophonist Joe Henderson. This is Ted Nash's arrangement of his classic, Inner Urge.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Ted Nash, arrangement and solo.
Any more questions for Mike and Chris?
Could I just say that I'm not sure that the reproduction is correct here. From where I'm sitting, I'm just bombarded by the bass end. So it's not meant to be like that, to be honest. If it sounds like that out there.
I knew we'd have this sometime during this session. Any more questions for any from the floor? Pointing that away. Ah, yes, I can just see you now. Sorry, I couldn't see for the light. Yes.
My question's for Chris, and I was just wondering, what's your number one tip for recording sound for a drama?
Signal to noise ratio is always my killer. You make sure your signal, your wanted sound, cuts through the noise, the unwanted sound.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more? Gentleman here.
As someone who's interested in documentary filming, although it might be different, how can you apply sound production in such a different workplace?
I cut my teeth doing documentaries, so I use my documentary filmmaking skills every day still. Same thing applies. Documentary is signal to noise ratio. Unfortunately, the days of a mic on top of the camera is the one place you don't want the mic to be. You want the mic to be close to the subject that you're filming. So, unfortunately, the budgets are tight now, so sound people don't necessarily get sent out on documentaries, but I was lucky enough to go around the world as an assistant and recording documentaries for a good 15 years before I moved into drama. So that same thing applies, signal to noise ratio. You make sure you're listening, your subject matter is what you want to hear, and you're not surrounded by noise. So if you're doing a documentary by the side of the road but can't see the road, move away from the road or show the road. You know, think directorially and framing. It's important for you to think about the story you're trying to convey as well. It's not just his problem to deal with. All of you are in it together. So if you're in a favela in Brazil, there's a road behind you but a wonderful shot up the hill, move 50 yards away from the road. Solve your problems. And it's that, you know, as a sound recordist, you don't demand, you suggest, you cajole people into doing the right thing, but generally you want them to do the right thing because they want to hear what the people are saying.
Another question over here. I think this is going to have to be our last one, I'm afraid, because we're running out of time. But
Hi. How do you feel about contemporary music being more founded in electronic machines than live instruments? How does that affect you as sound recordists?
Mike?
Yes, there is a tendency amongst some young bedroom music makers to use samples, and they can still be played live, of course. We had one on that, because all these clips from later were from last week's program. And there was a girl called Shura who makes that sort of music. But her band, there were four in them, but they were all playing live, but the actual sounds were mainly off samples, so they were sort of hitting buttons rather than scraping strings or blowing an instrument. Technically, it's less problems for the mixing because you're just getting clean sounds, but it's less organic, isn't it, really? As it's not satisfying musically, I don't think. I mean, presumably they may only be doing it that way because that's all they can do at the moment. It's, you know, unless there are particular sounds that they can't achieve using acoustic instruments. But in general, it's much nicer to use real people using real instruments. It depends what you're trying to achieve, though, of course.
do you have any short and sharp and sweet advice for people embarking into the field that you're obviously at the top of?
Well, only do it if you're passionate about it. In this case of sound, I would say.
Absolutely.
Anything you would add to that, Chris?
As you're get to know a network of people, work with as many people as you can, listen to the good stuff, decide what you feel is rubbish, throw it away. Learn from as many people as you can. There's a huge element of knowledge out there, and in a disparate freelance world, it's very hard to get it from as many people as possible. So get a network going, get to meet people.
Yes, in that sense, one of the professional associations might be worth joining. They usually have student rates because the knowledge of all the other people in that association that you can tap into makes up for a lot of what you couldn't achieve by, the old days of being in a big organisation that was very collegiate. Knowledge was shared that way, but now you might feel yourself alienated and out on your own as a freelancer, and you haven't got that sort of contact.
Having that levels of communication, I think, is terribly important. Well, I'm afraid to say we have run out of time, which is very, very annoying because I could have asked a lot more questions. I'd just like to thank Chris and Mike for a wonderful insight into their work. Thank you.